This is an interesting and rather difficult subject to work one's way through, and I think that's understandable. This business of determinism and or, maybe and it may be or, desire. First, I have to say this again. I'm not positing the view that there is free will. I'm not positing the view that there is an I. I am not positing the view that there is agency. In fact, in the whole idea of free will versus determinism, I'm something of a non-cognitivist in that regard. It's not that I am agnostic, because it interests me. I often say that I'm agnostic, but that's not actually true. I'm very interested, but the more I think about it, the more I realize that it might be kind of a false dichotomy. And it might be one of those things where you really can't even set up a dichotomy and argue it. Because I am not arguing either for or against determinism. I am just examining these concepts. It's interesting. My name and English Jackass raised an interesting point, which kind of zeroes in on it quite neatly, actually. Wants versus needs, or desire versus need. Now, let's look at it this way. In a determined universe, I feel hungry, therefore I go get food. I've been sort of triggered by previous things to go do what I'm going to do. Okay, now, what actually took place there? I would say that a need arose. The need for, more energy, more vitamins, minerals, etc. My body requires this. In some sort of non-theological, purely mechanical, reactive sense, this has triggered a need, a desire. This deficit triggers a desire. Because hunger is just hunger. It's not a series of abstractions that you work out in your head to say, I'm going to go get food and put it in my belly. It just says, you're hungry. The need, the deficit, just says, this is a deficit. It doesn't do anything more than that. The need triggers a desire. The need is the hunger. Or not even the hunger. The need is the deficit. Quiet street, surprisingly noisy today. Now, a need and a desire are not the same thing. And I'm not talking about needs versus wants here, where, want is pleasure and need is what you have to have. I'm trying to deconstruct the difference between and the interplay of needs and desires. They are not identical things. They're closely related, but they're not identical things. Now, you can say that I am determined, say, to desire food when I am hungry. Because that's just the nature of hunger, right? And the desire for food arises when you are in a state of deficit, a material deficit, I guess, for energy and minerals, stuff like that. Fine. I won't even question that. But where does the desire come from? Where does the desire to now actually do something come from? The desire to actually abstract things like, I am hungry, now I will put together an idea in my head of going into my kitchen, opening the fridge, taking out some cheese, some pickles, some bread, and consuming them. Maybe I was determined to feel hungry, yes. But something in me says, because I am hungry, I want to eat. The two are not the same thing. You can say that all of this is caused by a deterministic causal chain, an ironclad, hard deterministic chain. But desire is an active thing. Everything that is explainable through determinism is reactive. How do you explain the abstractions that arise from desire? Not how do you get from need to desire. How do you explain the abstractions, the ideas that here I am now and I have an empty belly? That creates sort of the motivation for a desire. Because I am hungry, I want to get up, walk into the kitchen, make myself a nice plowman's lunch, say. How does that happen? Desire. Something in me is active. The causal chain, per hard determinism, is reactive. But the active bit is unmistakable. Now, let's look at that the other way. Let's say I'm in a state that I don't want to be in. Or rather, I'll put it this way. Let's say that there's suffering that is presently taking place. There is not just a deficit, but an actual intolerable situation. I've thrust my hand, or somebody has thrust my hand into a fire. Without even understanding anything, I try and pull my hand out. That's a stimulus response action, right? That's just pure blind mechanics. That's not free either. That's just stimulus response. End of story. But some people can actually, and I have this capacity, I've actually demonstrated it. I'm rash enough to do that. Not quite in this graphic a sense, but I've done it. I've kept my hand in the fire. I never actually did that, but I've done things that were very difficult to do just to sort of see that if I could do it. I've overcome my will. Or I've overcome, rather, the stimulus response action using my will. You got to be careful even how you use language here. Why would I do that? There is suffering. I want the suffering to continue. Why? Just to see if I could do it. Asceticism works like that, right? You deliberately subjugate your needs/desires. And slash is not, it's in an and or thing. It's not, both are the same. They're not. Something is saying, I want something other than the satisfaction of this need, or the satisfaction of this desire, or I want to overcome this stimulus response action. I don't think that's unstoppable force versus immovable object, because it looks to me as though the will is often stronger than the mechanical bit of it all. You can get yourself to do stuff that makes no sense at all. And people will deliberately do this. I'm fascinated by the whole concept of asceticism. I'm not really that ascetic, but I'm perfectly capable of self-denial. Being forced into Catholic school for 15 years will do that to you. You learn self-denial and you learn to actually like it in a bizarre sort of way. And now there's something worth exploring, eh? So, again, none of this presupposes an I. But if you're going to throw desire down the sink, you're throwing joy, sadness, suffering, envy, hate, anger, jealousy, all this stuff. You're throwing that right down the sinkhole. You're saying none of that means anything. You're saying You're even throwing value down the sink. You're saying that none of that means anything. Nothing has any value. And as I've said before, in a hard deterministic universe, identity vanishes. So, my name said, you're basically abolishing the universe if you take desire out of it and maintain a hard conception, a hard deterministic conception of the universe. I think that might be the unstoppable force meets the immovable object. Desire is there, whether we like it or not, and so is the universe. Maybe they're not really in competition at all. Think about that. That's one of those pesky classical laws of logic, which aren't laws at all. They're statements of faith, in my opinion. The non-contradiction thing. How is it that contradictions like that, or perhaps not even contradiction, perhaps it's paradox, why can't those two things coexist? What's stopping that from happening? Don't just say because the law of non-contradiction says so. That's religion talking. Not interested. Why don't you demonstrate that this is impossible? I would say that the universe proves otherwise.